Welcome to the first episode, Conversations with Changemakers. Today, my guest is Arnav Dalmia. Arnav and his co founder Shivani Jain started a company called Cubii in 2013. This company produces wellness equipment for people of all ages. What Arnav is going to recount for us is how this company came to be, the pivotal moments in this company's life, and its exit. What I'm particularly interested in exploring with Arnav is his mindset, the motivations, and the key choices that he made in this journey. Join me as Arnav recounts all of this for us. Hi there, Arnav. Pleasure to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. So today what we're going to do is we're going to be talking to Arnav Dalmia about a company that he and Shivani Jain, his now wife, started back in 2014. The objective is to learn about their entrepreneurial journey and broader lessons about management, people management, capital, crises, exits, and the like. So that's our objective today. So Arnav, you and I have known each other for a few years, courtesy our connection to Jay Shekhawat. So I'm quite familiar with your story, a remarkable story. I want to sort of go backwards and ask this question that I think is really, really important. Why did you do this? How did you come to this idea? Tell us a little bit about your company, your product from the very beginning.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me, Prof. It's really an honor. We call ourselves accidental entrepreneurs because we had never anticipated starting a company so early on in our careers. So the way Cubii started was literally by accident. Both me and Shivani, along with another partner, Ryota, we were studying at the University of Chicago. We were kind of in our final year in college, and we decided to take part in a competition called the New Venture Challenge. And it's like a business plan competition, which many universities have. And the lure for us was $100 check that they were giving to each person who showed up at the information session. So as young, cheap, scrappy college graduates or college students at the time, we showed up just to collect $100. And that's when we learned about this thing called a business plan competition. And we were there. So we were like, you know what? We feel guilty about just collecting the $100 and not actually submitting a business plan. So let's write up a business plan and submit something. And we started brainstorming ideas and had like a long list, right from solar energy to getting people to power their homes by exercising. And we'll talk more about how we kind of got to Cubii, but started off with a long list of potential ideas for this business plan. And we took part in the competition, got some prize money from the university. This time it was $2,000, which was another sign of validation. And then we kind of looked at ourselves and said, you know what, maybe we have something going over here. So we started working on this overnights and weekends. And lo and behold, a few years in, we just found ourselves doing this full time.
So you start this company, you had at this point a somewhat better idea about what your product is. Tell me a little bit, or tell us a little bit about your early thoughts at this time and your actions. Like, what were you thinking, and what did you do in the very days?
Yeah. So following up on our brainstorming phase, we threw out a bunch of ideas on the wall, and how did we come up with those ideas was we were thinking about problems that we experienced in our everyday lives. So one of the problems that we thought of was going to the gym. And both me and Shivani, we were working in the suburbs, and we were spending 1 hour on the train every day, commuting back and forth from the city to the suburbs. And by the time we came back home after work, we were, I think, too lazy to go to the gym. So we looked at ourselves and said, hey, wouldn't it be cool to have a product that you could exercise at your desk so that you wouldn't feel as guilty about it by the time you came back home? So that's how this idea first came about. And we thought, there ought to be more people like us who have the same kind of problem where they're spending so much time commuting to work that, they don't have time to go to the gym. Later on, we found out this was just an excuse not to go to the gym, but at the time, we thought it would be a great business idea. So the first thing that we did was actually do some research on what else is out there, what else is selling right now. And what we found were things like standing desks, so people could stand and work, or we found treadmill desks, so people are like walking while they work. And we looked at both and we thought both were very impractical, right? I mean, if you're like a junior level analyst working for a consulting company or working for a corporate, you ask your boss, I want a treadmill underneath my desk. It's going to like, what the hell? I'm going to take that out from your paycheck. So we kind of found that cumbersome and expensive. So we kind of thought to ourselves, hey, can I come up with something that just fits underneath my desk? It's cheap enough that I can just buy it. So we went onto Amazon and tried to buy products that were similar to what we were thinking in our heads. And then we literally broke them apart to see what went inside it to make it, and then modified a few things. Like my friends in college thought that I was just like breaking things apart, like ordering these things from Amazon and breaking it apart. But we were really making our first prototype. And then we gave it to our friends to try out and give us feedback.
So, so you had this idea of a product that fits under the desk. Was there anything like that? I mean, were you creating essentially a new product?
Absolutely. We were creating a new category. We coined this phrase, which gets used a lot these days, called under desk elliptical. Nothing like that existed. Rather, the phrase never existed. And it's funny because as I think about the application of the product now, it's not actually used under a desk as much. It's actually used in front of people's couches and it's used in front of armchairs, but the phrase, the word, the category name still stuck. People still refer to it as an under desk elliptical. So we kind of became the Kleenex of the category. Because people started to like refer to the category by our brand name, which is a blessing and a curse that we can talk about as well.
That's quite amazing that you just created an entire category. So what you said was that you had bought products from Amazon, broke them apart, tried to make sense of what went into it, and tried to reimagine this product. It's sometimes said that producing one unit of a product is the easy part.
Yeah.
Producing hundreds or thousands, which is hard, which is the scaling part. So you've imagined the product, at least in your home, in your head. How did you go from there to producing it at some level of scale?
Yeah.
What was that journey like?
Yeah, it's a great question because none of us came from an engineering background. Me and my co-founders, so two of us were studying economics. The third one was studying biology. So nothing even close to engineering or design. But we were always wearing the consumer hat. We always kind of thought of ourselves as the consumer. And I think that was really our edge because we were able to not put on a design hat or engineer hat and think about what would be cool from a design or engineering perspective, but we always had our consumer hat on and think about what would I love as a consumer. So we kind of used that to our advantage. So once we bought products from Amazon, broke them apart, modified it to make it close to what we had envisioned. We then started to take that prototype to different factories in the US and overseas. And we said to people like, hey, this is basically what I want, but I want it to look better and I want it to be nicely designed, etc. Like this is the experience that I'm going for. And we tried to play within our wheelhouse, as opposed to telling these guys how exactly they should make the product. We just told them that as consumers, what is the experience that we were hoping to recreate? And then we really relied on our partners at factories where, they have full-fledged engineering teams, design teams to figure out the details of how do we get there? How do we get to the ideal customer experience that we're looking for? Eventually, we decided to work with a factory in China. So I moved to China for 6 months to like meet different factories and vet them. And they helped us go from one product to 20 products, which we again tested with people, got a lot of great insight, and then went from 20 products to like 100 and from 100 to 1,000.
So when you describe this, and I know you've done that in a couple of minutes, but I can well imagine that something like this was an adventure. You just said China. China is a mammoth country. How did you actually find the person or persons or the factory that were going to produce this product you had in mind?
Yeah, lots of bus rides and train rides within China and fears of getting lost and being in a taxi and messaging my co-founders that if you don't hear from me in the next hour, reach out to the police because I might be kidnapped. So lots of those types of stories kind of packed into that journey of actually finding the right partners to work with. But where we started off was just places online, like, Alibaba, for example. It's sort of the equivalent of Amazon if you're trying to buy something in bulk. So we just put in like exercise equipment, for example, to try to find factories that made exercise equipment. So that's how we kind of got like our initial list of suppliers, sort of reading reviews and seeing over there like who's kind of rated highly in Alibaba. But then when we went to actually visit these factories, the situation was very different. Like I still vividly remember one factory where it was just a shed and no machines, no nothing. And you had like livestock, you had hens and chickens like running around. And I was like, that doesn't seem the right place to kind of make our product. So we ended up visiting a lot of big factories, small factories, medium-sized factories. And eventually we ended up going with somebody in the middle because, it just felt like it wasn't the right thing. Like we wouldn't get the attention that we needed from like a large factory that was making products for like a large company. We didn't want to go with somebody too small because we felt like, again, they wouldn't have the ability to scale with us. But we went for something in between where they had, the eagerness to learn and to partner with us, but at the same time, they had the resources to scale. So it was honestly just a lot of trial and error. I don't think we got it right the first time around. We, tried working with a couple of factories, and I think the second or third time around, we finally found the partner that we've still been working with till date.
And what was that moment like when you recognized or realized that this partner was the right one for you? How did you come to that?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I think we never really knew until we had gotten into bed with them. So it was very risky in some sense because we first went into bed with them, we got the product made, we got the product out, and that's really the true test of is this the right partner or not? Because once consumers have the product, like do they like the product, and so on. Like I mentioned, the first time around we did not get it right, so we ended up shipping 2,000 products, 3,000 products, and it wasn't exactly the It was good, but it was not great. It wasn't the experience that we were hoping for. And we tried to give them the benefit of doubt, try to give them feedback, but they were not as receptive as we had imagined. So we started our hunt this time around, like a bit more smart, for someone, to see like, who would actually like listen to us, who would partner with us, who'd be willing to be flexible. And I think it just came from like maturity, I guess, to like identify somebody, to pick up on like their body language, their tone of communication, to see how receptive they were in accepting feedback. And I think that was the moment of truth for us, trying to find someone who, or a partner whose ego we did not hurt when we said to them that this is not how we like it. This is how we would like to do it differently. Because we always recognized we were not engineers, so we had to rely on somebody else to do that.
As you speak, I begin to think, why did they choose to work with you? Because you're a very small company.
Yeah.
And you are very young people, and they don't know whether your company is ever going to be viable. And they are investing their time, their effort, their energy to try and redesign a product for you. Why do you think they chose to do that?
That is a very, very important question. I think you can call us being naive, call us being amateurs or new to this, but we always were very transparent and authentic with whoever we worked with. So I would literally share with them my business plan on how I plan to take this from like 1,000 units to like 100,000 units. Now, in today's world, people might tell you that, you were foolish. You should not have done that. You're dealing with factories in Asia. There are IP concerns and trust concerns and so on and so forth. But I think we took the leap of faith because we did not have anything to lose. So I think what was really appreciated from them was the fact that we were like a group that did not have a lot of experience, did not have a lot of background, but we were always authentic in our conversations, and we were always transparent with what we were looking to achieve. We weren't trying to like, fight them for like pennies. We positioned it as a partnership where if we did well for us, they would do well for them. And I think that bought us a lot of credibility.
I'm thinking again about the way, you said that you studied economics. And I think one thing about economics is you learn imagination. You don't have practical knowledge of producing things, but you conceive things in your head. And economists often think about the production side of the business and the marketing side of the business, the sales side of the business. So here you are, you've imagined a product, conceived it, you've gone to China, you've produced it in the hundreds, perhaps in the thousands. But now I want to turn attention to the market. And by that, I mean the consumer.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that journey. What were you trying to achieve, and how did that go?
Yeah. As I speak about that, I'll just say that I think companies need to decide what do they want to be really, really good at. And I think in our situation, we knew that we weren't like any expert engineers or something. We just did not have that skill set. So the one thing we chose to become really good at was our consumer, like knowing them inside out, knowing what they drank, what they ate, what they, how they take, like what was most interesting to them. So people always say that listen to your consumers, get consumer feedback, but we really took that to another level, I think. Every box that we shipped actually had my personal cell phone number in it and my personal email. So I would get calls from consumers all the time. Sometimes it would be about like missing screws and getting angry because of that. But sometimes it would be about life-changing stories that these people have experienced using the product. I think the most memorable one for me is an old lady calling us and saying that she finally had enough strength in her legs to walk to the kitchen and fetch herself a glass of water. Such a simple act that we oftentimes take for granted, but having the strength and ability to do that for somebody who cannot, and I mean, it's priceless, right? Um, so we took a very keen interest in becoming the experts when it came to our consumer. In addition to my personal phone number, we also included prepaid postcards in every box. So people could literally like write to us messages and just throw it into the mail, and we paid for it to get that sort of insight. So that's kind of where our kind of customer relationship or customer journey sort of began. It's like really understanding very critically who our consumer is and how do we best serve them. And that became the competitive edge for the company.
Now, Arnav, you and I have talked before, and I love a story that you've told me um, about how you discovered the right customer. You had some ideas in your head about who would buy your product. And as you said in the beginning, Shivani and you were working professionals, busy, commuting from the suburbs, out of time. And so there is this feeling that young people like you, 20s and 30s, would like to have a product that sits under the desk. Tell us a little bit about your learning about that customer, what that customer wanted. Yeah.
Yeah. So when we first started the business, we thought the consumer was going to be like me and my co-founders, like 20 something year olds, recently started new jobs and, wanting to exercise while they worked. What we realized through all the consumer listening that we were doing was that people buying our product was not people like us. It was actually somebody much older. It was people in their 70s and 80s and people who had mobility challenges and people who were undergoing rehab. And it took us almost 2 years to accept that we were wrong. That the people who we thought would buy our product are actually not buying our product. It's somebody else. And as founders, I think oftentimes your ego prevents you from accepting something like that you were wrong. But what we ended up realizing was that for the person in the office, Cubii was a nice to have. It was a vitamin. But for the older adult who's in their 70s, 80s, who cannot go to the gym or, it's unsafe for them to exercise on gym equipment, Cubii was like a painkiller. Like they did not have any option. This was the only option that they had. And I learned from our good friend Jay that you want to be in the business of selling painkillers, not vitamins. So I think that's really when we decided to switch paths and focus on the older adult market because no fitness company was focusing on them. I think that was like a light bulb moment in our journey because when you think about fitness, most people think about young, athletic people sweating and wearing their Lululemons, but nobody thinks about older people. Whereas the reality is the older people probably need it more than the younger people.
Yeah.
So that's how we found our niche.
The other story that I love about Cubii is how you discovered the channels by which you sell this product. I'm sure you imagined in the beginning a production process, an ideal target customer, and a channel through which you reach this target customer. And I know from our conversations that things didn't play out the way you expected. Can you share with us how you came to discovering the channels for your target customers?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we started, again, we were like young 20 something olds trying to kind of follow the crowd. And the crowd at the time was focusing on channels such as Facebook and Instagram, and that's where people were spending money, spending the marketing dollars. So that's what we were doing because we thought that's the thing to do. But it really wasn't. We were selling some product, but we really were not selling like a lot. And somebody once recommended to us, this gentleman was slightly older, and he recommended, why don't you try selling your product on television? Because your product needs some demonstration to really understand what this thing is. I mean, this is like a brand new category. You don't wake up thinking you want this. People need to learn about the product first before they actually even consider buying it. And when you're just putting up a static image or something on Facebook, like how do you even explain to people what this thing is? So the 20-something old in me was very, very reluctant in putting this product on an infomercial on television because, again, our generation did not grow up seeing infomercials. So we kind of thought it being old school, being dated, like almost kind of coming with a little bit of a stigma. And we thought, no, that's not us. So we kind of resisted that urge for a long, long time. Or rather, it wasn't even an urge. We resisted that advice. And then somebody recommended that, okay, if not infomercials, why don't you try a channel such as QVC, which is like modern day infomercial or TV shopping. And I was like, yeah, like, okay, that I can probably try. I don't know how it's gonna do, but sure, why not? Like let's give it a shot if you're insisting. So we ended up partnering with QVC. When they first saw the product, they loved it, and we were like surprised, like why are they loving it so much? And then we launched with a 15-minute airing. I think it was going to be like a 5-minute airing, but it ended up doing so well that they made it into a 15-minute airing. And it's sold out. We sold more products in those 15 minutes than we had in the past 12 months. So much beyond like our wildest dreams. And I think that's really kind of when it hit us that we were trying to sell the product through channels where our consumer is not there. We need to focus on channels where our consumer is already spending time. And even if we did not like infomercials, our consumer liked it. And I think that mattered more. So that's when we kind of shifted gears and started to focus on, channels such as QVC, infomercials, and so on.
That's a great story. Let me now turn to something very important for any entrepreneur: money, capital. Tell us a little bit about your experience, how you thought about it, how you went about raising money, not just in the beginning, but through this journey. Because to go and spend months in China, you need capital. And I know, you and I have talked a little bit about how you did it, but I'd like for you to share with the audience the role of money, capital in all of this.
Yeah, that's also a topic very close to my heart. Um, you know, I keep going back to this thing about when you're in your 20s, you look at people around you, and the only thing that I was reading about in the last 10 years was company X raising $100 million, company Y raising 500 million. And when you're a startup founder, you start to think that that is the only way to finance a business, raising millions and millions of dollars from venture capital. So that's what we did. We went out to the street and tried to reach out to any and every person on LinkedIn who had like an investor title next to them and said, hey, this is our business. Would you be willing to invest in our company? And 99% of the time, the answer that we got was no. So that was extremely frustrating because we had spent a ton of time trying to fundraise, and I think we got nowhere when we first had this idea. The feedback that we kept getting from investors was go out and make some sales, and if you have sales, then I'll consider investing in you. So at the time, we launched a crowdfunding campaign on Kickstarter with very little capital. I think I had like $5,000 in savings. Half of that went to make the prototype, and then half of that went to produce like a short 3-minute video. And we put up this video that kind of talks about our story, why we're working on what we're working, the inspiration behind it. And we put it up on Kickstarter for crowdfunding to see if there are other people that are literally going to put down money to buy this type of a product, or was it just in our heads? And again, over a span of 30 days, I think we ended up selling almost 1,000 products with a zero marketing budget for $300 a pop. So in 30 days, we had like $300,000 in sales, which again, we were like on top of the world, like, wow. So that is how we initially funded the business. And then we took that feedback, we took that kind of chip on our shoulder and went to investors. And I said, hey, now will you invest in my business? Like, look at me, I have $300,000 in sales. And they're like, yeah, it's nice, congratulations, but it's not enough. You need to show more. And that is when, I started to sort of understand that no matter what I'm going to do, it's going to convince some people to invest in this. There are some business that are venture backable, and certain businesses that are not. So instead of constantly trying to pick up the phone and constantly, pitch investors and get constant rejections, we kind of told ourselves, we're going to build this business the old school way. And how do you build a business the old school way? You actually bring in some revenue and you have expenses. And at the end of the day, you're left with something called profit. That's what we're going to take home. And that's what we're going to reinvest back into the business. And I learned that because I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs. My parents were both, business people. Venture capital and stuff like that did not exist in India. So they built businesses the old school way of, bringing in revenue, making sure that your expenses were less than the revenue. And then the little thing, beautiful thing that's left behind, it's called profit. And the family survives off of that. And if you want to grow the business, you put that back into the business. So that's how we kind of started to build out the company, really make sure that our expenses were less than our revenue. So we were making something at the bottom line and then constantly just reinvesting that into growing the company.
That's a great lesson. Profit is still very, very important. That's a great lesson, Arnav. I want to shift back again to something that every entrepreneur, every business person experiences, crises. Can you recount one or two crisis moments in this company's life where that crisis originated and what you did when it emerged?
Yeah. Well, I think there could be a full book on the number of crisis moments that we had. But just to kind of recount one or two of them, when we first started kind of shipping our product, we realized that the screws that went into every box were not the right size. And it was just off by like one size, basically. So I mean, if you really wanted to make it work, you could make it work, but the product would not be as still or would not be as put together as we wanted. So I remember this moment where we got like 1,000, 2,000 units shipped to us from China. We're getting ready to ship these units, but I know that the screws are not right. So we literally ended up like opening every box and taking out the old screws, replacing it with the new screws, and then repackaging it. Because we did not have a lot of money, we didn't have access to labor to do it. So we were the ones kind of doing it. We literally set up a mini assembly line where one person would open the box, the other person would replace it, and the third person would kind of close it back up. And I think this journey, it really kind of helped us develop some grit and hustle. It would have been very easy to say that, okay, we're going to fix the screw in the next batch of production. It's only 1,000 units that we're shipping. But we knew the value of those 1,000 consumers that were going to get the product. We knew that if they actually loved the product, they would rave about it to, each person would rave about it to 10 people. And I don't think we could afford any single consumer having a negative experience. So we said, you know what? No, we're just gonna get this right, even if it is like a small thing.
Arnav, did you ever have any fears, especially after you committed some time and effort to this whole journey? Any fears that this thing was not going to end well? Tell us a bit
Yes.
about how you psychologically manage things.
Yeah. Um, I think mental health is one of those topics that doesn't get spoken a lot about in entrepreneurship, but I think it's a really important one. Um, Speaking for myself, I had taken on like a very small amount of money from investors, nothing like you read about in the tech star in like TechCrunch and stuff like that, but like a very, very kind of small amount. And I always had this thing that I never wanted to lose my investors' money. And I also had a bunch of employees, like a small number of employees working for me, like 4 or 5, that were working on salaries that were under market, but I had promised them some equity options in the business. And they were really relying on me. They were betting on me to have a good outcome at the end of this. And that came with a lot of pressure. And I think I attribute it to my upbringing, where I was not comfortable ever letting this be a zero outcome business for my investors and for our employees. So we've had a lot of like these existential moments where we didn't know if the business was going to exist. But I always, once we had enough money in the bank, I always told our CFO, I want to keep enough money aside that even if I got to return money to my investors dollar for dollar, like at least I can do that. So that way I haven't, increased their investment, but I haven't like killed it completely. So mentally, I think it's very stressful when you have those moments of, is the business going to make it? But I have all these liabilities, I have these obligations from people. And I think the way I got around it was speaking to advisors and talking to people who had been down this path before. I don't think I could afford like a therapist or a coach at that point in time. So it was really about surrounding myself with other entrepreneurs who had gone through similar journeys and having honest conversations with them, that what can I do to be in the right headspace so I can continue running this business well, as opposed to living under this fear that the business is going to shut down and I'm going to, be on the hook for all of these investors. So that is one lesson that I always share with entrepreneurs who I work with now, which is finding a good set of mentors or advisors early on who can help you navigate those challenges, because being an entrepreneur is kind of like it can sometimes be a lonely journey.
Yeah.
So you want to have your group of you want to have your support system, your group of advisors and mentors to kind of pull you up when you're feeling down.
Yeah. Arnav, and then you had an exit. Perhaps you anticipated it, perhaps you didn't. Tell us a little bit about how all of that happened. And yes.
Yeah. So another lesson that I learned from my parents was build a business that you never want to sell.
Yes.
And it kind of doesn't mean that, okay, you would never want to exit or sell the business. What it really meant was building a business with the philosophy that you're building it for the next 100 years, not for the next 5 years, not for the next 10 years. You really want this thing to like outlive you. So make business decisions accordingly that are not short-term focused, it's actually long-term focused. So that is also a piece of advice that I followed very closely. I didn't build Cubii in a way with a timeline in mind that I wanted to exit the business within a certain time frame. I built it with the mindset that I could hold on to this business for the next 100 years if I wanted. and made sure that the business was profitable, like we discussed earlier, and paying our bills and paying healthy salaries to our employees and making an impact in the lives of our consumers. So that is fundamentally how we built this business. And by the time like 2020 came around, the business was immensely profitable. It was a very healthy, profitable business that was almost doubling and tripling in sales every year. I think that was the outcome of this mindset, like building a business that you never want to sell. And then I think the process of selling the business was a little bit like a dating process. I thought I would consider it if I got the right partner and the right valuation, but I was not desperately kind of out there looking to sell the business. So right around when COVID happened, we decided to like really double down, focus on the business. We didn't know if the business was going to survive or not, but the thing that we did know was let's just focus on what we know best, which is running the company. And then a lot of fitness companies, fitness equipment companies were doing really well because gyms were closed and people were exercising at home. So it kind of put us in this unique position that I don't think anybody could have predicted. I mean, turned out to be a little bit like a black swan event where the demand for our products kind of went through the roof. And we started to get approached by a number of companies that found what we were doing very, very exciting and very, very promising. So we started to have some conversations, again, with the same idea that, yeah, let's test the waters, let's have some conversations. And if we find the right partner, we will sell. And then I think that ended up happening in October of 2020. We had found somebody, we had enjoyed speaking to them. We thought they were going to be the right partners to help scale the business. So we ended up selling a majority stake in the company to them and ended up being a great outcome for a lot of our initial investors and founders.
And I know that in 2022, Arnav, Shivani, and you stepped down from the company. And so what have you done since?
Yeah, so we stepped down in 2022. For one, Shivani and I became new parents in 2021. So I think we consider ourselves extremely fortunate to have some time and flexibility to spend with our daughter. She's 2.5 years old now. I think as I think about like what constitutes like a rich and happy life, it's not just financial success. It's about your relationships with your kids, with your family. And over these last 10 years when we were building the business, I think we had really not invested as much time in family or friends because we were singularly focused on building the company. So I think over the last year and a half, we've had some time to disconnect, almost like refresh ourselves a little bit, connect with family, spend a lot of time with our daughter. I've also gone on to join a venture capital firm called 81 Collection. And again, this was an opportunity that came to us where a couple of local Chicago founders were getting together to create a venture capital fund for emerging founders from the Midwest and the rest of the US. And it was a new venture and one whose values aligned very well with our values. So we decided to become one of the founding partners at 81 Collection. So as of now, we are investing in companies. We've raised a small fund. We're investing in companies. But I'm also sort of searching for the next business that I want to start. So that is still a work in progress. But for now, I am taking some time to like breathe and kind of suck in all of the learnings and all the experiences that we've had over the years.
Congratulations, Arnav. That's fantastic. I know that you are spending some part of the year in Singapore. Tell us a little bit about what you do there how you enjoy living there, and whether Singapore is playing a role in the next phase of your life. I'm talking about your business life.
Yeah. So again, once we exited from Cubii, I think you were kind of at a point in life when we were very comfortable. And somebody once told us that that is your biggest enemy. You don't want to get to a point where you get into a zone where you're too comfortable. So we decided to try something new and different. And this is something that we had always had in mind, was trying to live in another country and trying to live in another place to like gain appreciation for their culture and just learn about how the world functions, not just with a singular minded view, but having more of a global perspective. So, having lived in India, having lived in the US, we thought, let's try living in Asia. Let's try living in, a place like Singapore, which attracts a lot of people from all different parts of Asia. People from China, Indonesia, Vietnam, India, and Singapore is a hub for a lot of these expats. So we made the move about a year and a half back, kind of like an experiment to see what it would be living in another country and learning about their culture. But what I also realized was that they had a growing startup ecosystem. And I think that was the lure for me. So I've had a chance now to meet a number of founders and investors from the South Asian or just Asian ecosystem in Singapore. And that's been very refreshing because on a number of fronts, I think number one, it just exposed me to an area that I was not familiar with. Number two, I've gained a fresh respect for the ecosystem that we have in the US. There's certain things culturally about the US which I think are unique to the US. And I think we've gained like a fresh amount of respect for it. And I don't think I would have gotten that had I not made the move and not tried out something else. So we're kind of in this phase in our lives where we are still experimenting with a few things while our daughter is still young. I think we'll need to lay down roots soon in the next couple of years. But for now, we're just enjoying this time testing and experimenting with our lives.
So I want to sort of ask you for advice now, advice for young entrepreneurs. A lot of people tell me that they wish they knew some things when they started their journey. And they have to discover it the hard way. You've learned many things along the way. What are some of the most important pieces of advice you would give a young entrepreneur today?
I think one of the most important pieces of advice I would give is keeping in mind that there is no one way to build a company. And there are certain businesses that can be bootstrapped, that can be started with very less investment. And there are certain businesses that do require a lot of investment. And I think in the media, in social media, based on what we read, I think the stories that get highlighted are only the ones which are glamorous. The ones where millions of dollars have been raised, the ones that give readers the perception that the founders know everything that they're doing. But in reality, that is a very small number of companies. I think the bulk of businesses that get started in America and around the world are actually small businesses with very little capital, or mostly bootstrapped businesses, mom and pop businesses. And I think they have just as much of a right to win as any other business. So I think that is sort of been one of my biggest learnings through the Cubii experience, that you can still build something extremely powerful and impactful, kind of without going down the conventional way. The other thing people talk a lot about these days is AI and technology and stuff. And absolutely, I think AI and technology and all these amazing things have a space in today's world. But if you're working on a startup or have a startup idea and it's not AI related or it's not technology related, it doesn't mean that you're destined to fail from the start. And I think that's one of the things that I always remind founders that I interact with is that there's no one right way to start a business. There's no one type of business that, software businesses are the only types of businesses that are going to be successful, or companies that have raised venture capital, those are the only businesses that are going to be successful, or you need an MBA in order to start a business. So I think there are these common myths based on like what's been put out there in the world that you need certain characteristics. But I think the reality is that anybody can be an entrepreneur if they decide to put their heart and mind to it.
Arnav, these are great stories. As you know, I'm writing about you, Shivani, and your company in my book. And when I think of your story, the story you've recounted today, I think about a few things that are never very well told in books and even in magazines and in other kinds of media. And that is that life is not just upwards and to the right. There's a lot of sideways movements, even downwards movements. I also love that thing that you told me even some years ago, that you manage your business revenues minus expenses. Somehow that seems to be much less emphasized today in the world of startups. So I view these messages as really important. Arnav, thank you so much for joining me today and for sharing your story with me and with my audience. I greatly appreciate that. I should also mention, I forgot to do so in the beginning, that Shivani and Arnav received an Early Career Achievement Award from the University of Chicago in 2023. And, I look forward to hearing about your next big thing. And so, Arnav, thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Arnav. Thank you.